Hello, friends, and welcome to this Thrive Today webinar, Stories of Emotions. My name is Kristy Harrang. I'll be your host, and our co-founders, Chris and Jen Coursey, will be joining us in just a moment. So, if you're new to Thrive Today, I first want to mention that we are a nonprofit Christian ministry that trains people in brain-based relational skills. So these skills affect every area of our life. For example, they help us to live with more joy and peace. They help us to have healthier, stronger connections with God and others, and they help with our emotions. So we've all had times, right, where emotions have been running a little bit high, like political discussions, family events, stressful work projects, or times of transition like moving or sending a child off to college. And oftentimes in these situations when, somebody can't hear me, but I think my volume's on. So in these situations, sometimes we can get stuck and we don't know how to navigate through the situation. And this is where relational skills come in because they help us to be more aware of our emotions. They help us to be able to manage what we feel, and they help us to be more present and helpful with other people who are feeling big things like sadness or fear or anger. And so, one powerful tool to help us with emotions is stories because they show our brains new possibilities for how we can navigate through situations where big emotions are present. So, Chris and Jen and I are going to be sharing with you stories from our own journey and experiences with emotions. So, with that, I want to invite Chris and Jen to join me. So, Chris is our president and, as I mentioned, our co-founder. He's an author of several books, including the 4 Habits series that he wrote with Dr. Marcus Warner, as well as the Joy Switch. So, Chris, thanks for being with us.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thank you, Kristy. I'm going to enjoy our time today.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Oh, good. I'm glad that the person who is having trouble hearing can hear now. So, and then Jen, she also is our co-founder and she is our executive director. She's our chief contributor to our blog at Thriving Mamas. So, Jen, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you. Good to be here today.
So before we jump in, I want to mention a couple quick things. The first is that we're going to try to keep this webinar short to about 30 minutes or so we don't plan to take Q&A. However, I would love for you to write your questions into the chat or the Q&A feature. We have an admin who will answer any questions she can or direct you to a place where you can learn more. If we have time, we might take 1 or 2 at the end, but we really want to hear the questions that are coming up for you. Also, for our veterans who are familiar with 4+ stories, we just wanted to let you know that the stories we're sharing today are not specifically going to follow the 4+ training model, just FYI. So with that, Chris, I wanted to have you start by talking to us about the big 6. We talk about the big 6 emotions with Life Model Works and Thrive Today. So can you share what those are? And secondly, why being able to identify emotions is such an important part of being able to regulate and manage our feelings?
Yeah, so these are the 6 core emotions. And from a training perspective, we learn them individually first, because what happens is these emotions are like a color wheel, and sometimes they combine, they merge, and the colors kind of shade a little bit. So the big 6 emotions we have here are sadness, anger, despair, shame, fear, and disgust. And so our friend Marcus Warner would call them the sad emotions, only for fear. We'd call it anxiety. But these are the big 6. And so developmentally, after your brain learns lots of joy and rest, your brain actually has to learn how to feel, share, and quiet these feelings. And so I have to learn how to feel, share, quiet it, stay relational while I feel these feelings, and get back to joy and peace. And so that's where these examples today are going to be so helpful, because one of the best ways your brain learns how to navigate these emotions is through stories. And so we're going to share some of our stories and try to model a little bit what this journey can look like. So I'm really glad you're here, and I'm looking forward to our time together.
Wonderful. Jen, anything else you want to add in before we start into our first round of stories?
Just one little detail, which is that while when you call them the big six emotions, these would be the big six negative or distressing emotions. So one of the other emotions we talk about is joy, and that's our big one we're aiming for. So there are seven, but we're talking about the ones because we want to live more in joy. So we're talking about the ones that we maybe want to spend a little less time in.
Yes, that is a very good point. Yeah, so we're talking about, yeah, big six, the ones that we struggle with that are a little more
Yeah.
challenging. Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and Chris, have you kick us off. We're going to start by telling stories of our own journeys of growing through emotional challenges personally. And so Chris, why don't you kick us off and talk about your experience with hopeless despair?
Yes, so hopeless despair was my kryptonite. Hopeless despair was really a difficult emotion for me. Hopelessness is really one of those emotions that is what we call a parasympathetic emotion, which means it's a low energy, it's an energy draining emotion. And so when we feel hopeless despair, it drains our batteries real quick. So I grew up avoiding hopelessness, right? I avoided hopeless despair. I didn't even realize how much I avoided it because what my experience was when I felt hopeless and I slipped into some hopeless despair, the emotion felt so big. Frankly, it felt consuming. I just felt like I was stuck in quicksand. And no matter how hard I tried to get out of hopeless despair and try to escape it and fight it, it seemed like I just kept slipping deeper and deeper into hopeless despair. So hopelessness was very smothering for me. And the ways that I often would avoid it is to try to be happy or try to think about other things or try to distract myself. And, life happens, relationships happen, and I just would bump into hopelessness and it would not only drain my energy, but when I would feel hopeless, I felt, my shallow breathing. I just like my energy was zapped and sapped. I lost my motivation. My shoulders would actually slump. Um, I felt like I just wanted to stay in bed or just like stay in bed and be on screens all day. Like I did not want to experience that. And the emotion kind of felt like having some jagged shrapnel in my leg. Like it's just like one of those things. I want to get away from this, but I can't get away from this. And so one of the really, I think, special things that God did to help me with this is I had some people in my life who were pretty good at being hopeless. And that sounds a little strange, but they actually remained themselves while they were hopeless. And so, in other words, these were people I knew well enough that I could see when they slipped into hopeless despair for whatever reason. And I was shocked to discover that like they didn't change who they were. Because for me, I felt like I have to like get away from this as fast as humanly possible. But they were able to stay relational. They were able to kind of keep their personality and not act like someone else. And they were able to even like feel their feelings. They could share and they say, Chris, yeah, I'm feeling some hopelessness right now. And I'm like waiting for them to like run away or something because they're in hopeless despair, but they would stay relational and they were able to like quiet their feelings. And I felt like I was just looking at the Grand Canyon, watching these examples, like, how this is amazing. Like, I can't believe this. And so being able to start interacting with them, I started to hear some of their stories. I started to find those examples and start really finding the encouragement that I could still feel these feelings and stay my relational self and not disengage. And over time, I would get my ankle in the water and I'd be like, okay, I could do that, and my leg would be in the water and then the water up to my hips. Like I started to be able to feel the feelings, I could share it, and I started to learn how to like recover from that all while I was feeling some genuine hopeless despair. That grew my confidence, my motivation. It felt like watching the morning fog just start to kind of dissipate with the wind. That's how it felt to be able to start to recover from hopeless despair. And to this day, I'm really thankful that for the most part, I'm actually able to stay myself, stay relational, and even bounce back from those times of hopeless despair. And it feels lighter. I feel hopeful. I feel even energetic and excited about the whole thing. So I don't shy away from feeling hopeless anymore. I actually feel comfortable in that emotion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. That's such a great example for us. And I think it's really helpful for people to hear how you struggled in particular because,
Yeah.
it's easy to look at Chris and think, oh, he's good all the time,
Yeah.
and to
That's
know
right.
that you've had your own struggles too. It's just really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. That's right.
Jen, how about you? You've got some history with fear.
Yes. Yes, I do. Fear is probably the biggest emotion that I've struggled with, but I honestly struggled with all of them. Before I was introduced to this, I did not know how to regulate any of them or manage any of them. In fact, I was afraid of feeling any of my emotions. So there's the fear jumping in there too. Um, Really, I was the most afraid of feeling afraid, which is kind of silly. But not because I was afraid of the feelings. I was afraid of how I would feel to the degree that my motivation and decisions were based on how can I avoid things I'm afraid of. And it honestly was kind of pretty controlling in my life. I let fear take the lead in ways that I'm not proud of, and I cringe looking back on. I moved out of state multiple times to move away from things I was afraid of. That's how much I let fear run me instead of me managing my emotions or being able to metabolize them, which is different. That's how I feel about emotions now. Like, you eat something and then your body metabolizes it. Well, the emotion comes and I'm in it, and then I'm on the other side of it. And I didn't push it away. I didn't push it down. I didn't distract myself from it. Like I went through it. And I spent so much energy for so many years trying to not have to go through it because I didn't know how to. Um, it was, I mean, I kept myself super busy. Again, like I said, I tried to avoid things that would create fear. I I just did not manage things well when I was letting fear run things. Finally, a counselor actually sat down with me and sat with me in one of my fears. I dipped my toes in the water with some fear, and um, and realized that I could sit in it and it wouldn't kill me. And because that's how it felt. It felt like if I felt fear, it was going to be the end of me. Um, and after doing that a few times, after starting to practice that on my own and just stop instead of distracting myself or avoiding the fear or pushing it away, just let it kind of wash over me. It washed on over me and it went away. And I started to learn that it was better to just sit in my fear rather than run from it. And soon I was able to not make all my decisions based on what I was afraid of or what I was trying to avoid. And I could quiet when fears came and take some deep breaths and even ask myself, okay, how would I handle this situation if I wasn't afraid? How could I live out without my fear controlling how I do things? And there's still times that fear motivations creep in for me unnoticed, but I have seen such huge changes in myself in terms of my motivations, my joy, and my peace levels once I learned how to regulate these emotions rather than have to hold them at bay.
Hmm, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. And it is knowing you. What I love about this is I hear stories and I know that God's done a major transformation because I can't imagine, you having fear be such a prevalent thing in your life because I know it's not now. So it's encouraging to hear about that. Very cool.
Yeah. And Shannon, or I know Kristy, you've got a certain emotion here that I think
Yeah.
it's
I I
some
do.
some
Yeah,
shame
I'm going to
going
talk
there.
about shame. And honestly, I had no clue I struggled with shame until much later in life. But I did. I struggled so much with shame. And for me, I really struggled with making mistakes of any kind. Like I just didn't feel comfortable making mistakes or getting anything wrong. And if I would make a mistake, it would like derail me. Sometimes it would knock me out for days. I would be replaying things over and over and over again in my head of how I could have done it differently. And it would just sink me with this like heavy, defeated, like, oh, feeling. Um, but because I didn't like that feeling too, a lot of times I would go toward anger. I'd get really self-defensive, really angry with people who would point out flaws because it's like my boxing gloves were up to protect me. And so what was really helpful for me, and Chris, you touched on this, was my husband's, you touched on stories and watching other people. So my husband, I started noticing he doesn't really seem to get as ruffled by correction. And my antennas started going up. And then I remember a moment that was just really life changing for me is that we were in campus ministry and there was a student that brought some like negative feedback to him, some constructive criticism. And I remember watching him navigate through that and getting some counsel on how to work through it. And our mentor was like saying to him, take it, receive it, learn from it. And so Nick did. He received it, he listened, he had an open mind, he didn't let it sink him, he didn't get defensive. And I was just watching it, seeing like, oh my goodness, wow, this is not how, I don't even think I could do that. I'm not sure I could respond that way at all. And so it gave me a model for the possibilities of how things could look differently. Um, and I think for me, relational skills really help us. They help us in so many ways, but they help form stronger bonds with God. So for me, like developing a stronger, secure attachment to God was really helpful with building that security so I could handle not being perfect. I could handle making mistakes. And then, really developing the skills for me has been helpful because it's like I can be aware of my responses to shame. And when I'm starting to feel defensive, it's like I'm more aware of it. I know how to actually calm and quiet myself. I know how to connect with Jesus and say, what's your perspective on this? What do you want me to see? Because at the end of the day, it's what he's wanting to show me that I need to pay attention to. And if he's safe and secure and for me, then I don't have to be afraid of making a mistake or being corrected because he's going to help me through it. And so it's just brought a lot more peace. And it's not that I don't ever struggle with it because I do, but it doesn't have that hold on me that it used to. Now I can invite correction or people seeing things in me because I used to equate it with rejection and now I don't. So that's been very helpful.
That's excellent. That's really good, Kristy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Encouraging.
Yes.
And I should mention, just to be very clear, that, and hopefully it is clear that we are all in journey. Chris and Jen we're not coming saying we have conquered and we don't struggle anymore. We are very much so on this journey with you guys. And so, as we share ways that we've grown and seen God do really great things, know that we're still on the journey with you and all of that.
Yeah, and as you say that, it reminds me of how, like, when you start practicing these skills, they kind of sneak up on you. I just noticed with some of my emotions, there were times I would actually reflect after the moment and go, oh, I think I handled that a little better than I normally would have. That would have put me out of commission for a long time, and I was able to recover a little bit faster. So it starts to surprise you a little bit when we start going down this road.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And that's something that Jen says all the time is relational skills are not, the goal is not that we never mess up or we never fall out of the boat. It's that we learn to get back into the boat quicker. So yeah, we're going to continue to have times where we don't respond well, but we learn to recognize it quicker and then we have what we need to get back on track, which is great. So part of emotions is not just dealing with our own emotions, but being present with other people. And I'm sure like we all have times where I've had times where it feels like what I'm feeling is too big and no one else can be with me because it's just too much. And that's a really crummy place to be. And we've all probably had times where we've been with other people who are feeling something and we're like, man, I don't know how to sit and be there with them. Like, this is making me want to duck out. It's making me want to, get them to stop. And so this is a really important topic, is learning how to be with other people. in their emotions. So, Jen, you've got a really great story of being with Chris and some of his emotions.
Yeah, and what's interesting here is that I totally resonate with what you said, Kristy, which is I didn't used to be able to sit with people in their emotions because I didn't know how to manage my own. And when you can't like handle emotions yourself, then it feels like diving in the deep end and not knowing how to swim if you get in the water with somebody who's in the water. And so that that honestly was my default, was how do I shut this down? How do I get away from this? Because if I get in the water with you, I'm gonna drown right next to you. I'm not gonna be able to actually like offer you a life preserver. So in all honesty, that is still my default response that I have to overcome. So Chris was sharing with me how just disgusted he was when, after he had watched the news, he was just so disgusted with some of the ways things are going in our country and some of the things that he was seeing on the news. He was just feeling a lot of disgust. And the definition of disgust is like, this is not life-giving. And so he was just feeling like, this is so life-sucking, not life-giving here. And I noticed my first desired response in that moment was my default to help him feel better. Like, oh, it's not as big of a deal, or, oh, I think it's not as bad as you're thinking, and try to talk him out of his emotions. But because I've been working on this for a long time, and because I've been working on my own emotions, I was able to catch myself and caught the words in my head before they came out of my mouth. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes they come out of my mouth and then I catch myself in the middle of it or after. But that time I caught myself while they were still in my head and not out of my mouth. And I was just able to synchronize with him, like, yeah, it is. It's just, that is not life-giving. This is, and I was able to be with him in it and just feel with him what he was feeling. And it was really encouraging to me, honestly, just to be able to do that. Because as Chris said, when you look at where you are now and you just notice like, oh, I didn't used to be able to do that, and now I can, it's so encouraging. So that was one of those moments for me too, was that I was able to be with him in that this is not life-giving place. And rather than avoiding it or trying to talk him out of it, I could just join him in it.
Yeah, and that felt, I have to say, on the receiving end of that, when I was kind of swimming in the soup of my disgust. I could remember a time in the past where Jen might have panicked a little bit when I had some big emotions, and she said she would have probably tried to offer, something like, here, just it's gonna be okay. You don't have to feel this way. And you know what, Jen attuned so well that I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt understood. I didn't feel alone in these big feelings that I was having. I actually felt like I was able to share something with her. She was able to join me in it, and it felt glorious. It felt like suddenly this big old disgust ball of yarn was suddenly more manageable. It wasn't so big and so out of control and so daunting and frightening. It was like, oh yeah, like, oh, you know what? I'm not alone in this. And actually that ended up helping me to get God's perspective, which is also what I needed. So because Jen was able to attune with me, kind of help the relational parts of my brain come back online, then I could get God's perspective. And it's like, okay, that's what I needed. That's what I needed. And so now when those reactions come up, it's neat because it's easier to get God's perspective on those things because of having someone who can attune with us in our big feelings. It was just so valuable, and really just, it felt like that's what I needed to get back to joy and peace while I was feeling that disgust.
Very cool.
And I just want to add a quick comment, because I saw a question kind of pop through here about being with other people in their emotions. And so the interesting thing is the way we learn how to manage our own emotions initially often is somebody's with us in them. But once we have built those pathways in our brain, we can then travel those pathways whether somebody is physically with us or not. So I just wanted to make that quick comment, since we're talking about how like people can be with us in our emotions.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks, Jen. Well, Chris and I both have stories of being with other people that we'll share briefly before we talk about some really cool ways to go a little bit deeper with this. But Chris, why don't you talk to us about being with somebody in sadness?
All right, thank you, Kristy. So yes, I have a friend of mine who is swimming in sadness, and not too long ago he was swimming in his sadness. There's loss in his life, and sadness is I've lost some life here, and I have some feelings about this. And so he was kind of feeling like life has just passed me by, and he would share this, and this was heavy. I felt like it was inviting me into holy ground by him sharing his sadness with me. I knew this is an important moment, and I wanted to tread carefully in how I responded because this was really close to his heart. And I could see the sadness in his body. It was like somebody put an 80-pound barbell on his shoulders, like, and they just dropped it there. Like I could see his body was draped in this weight. It was almost like he was getting lost in his sadness and he wasn't quite sure what to do. So I was able to validate him, like, this sounds really big. Like I can see the effects on you. This is brutal. I can tell this is just really pulling on your battery here. So I was able to just attune. I didn't try to fix it. I was working hard not to do that. I didn't want to minimize him. So I validated him. I was sitting with him. And then I even offered, a little invitation of like, what do you need when you feel this way? Like, this is heavy stuff. What would be helpful? Because I wanted him to verbalize it. I wanted him to put words to what would be helpful. I didn't want to dominate my thoughts or impressions. I wanted him to share that. And it was neat to just almost see a little bit of sparkle in his eyes as he was like, okay, you're with me. I think he was a little bit surprised that I didn't shut him down. I think he's just used to kind of getting shut down there, and he just, it was like something in him kind of sparked a little bit. And I was able to share that sadness with him, stay present with him while he was feeling his feelings. And yeah, there was a little bit of helplessness because I was like, oh, I wish I could fix this for him. I hate to see my friend hurting like this, but just being able to validate, comfort, and attune. I noticed that, a little bit of wind started to come back into his sails. And after a little while, he turned to me and he was like, just thank you for being with me here. Thank you for not trying to fix me. And I'm like, what an honor. Like, I've just truly felt honored that he would share that sadness with me and I could join him in that and be with him in that. And then eventually he was able to even get God's perspective a little bit later. He was able to get God's perspective on some of what was happening, and that helped to anchor him in the storm. So that's such a meaningful moment. I just honestly just felt honored that he would let me in there.
That's very cool. And it just illustrates, I'm going to share about it in my story too, but the power of just being with someone. I think sometimes we're just uncomfortable because we feel like it's our job to fix it. And it's not, when we start understanding what is our role, what are we calling to do? And the greatest thing we can offer in emotions is just being present. For me, anger was an emotion that seems so bad. Like, the goal is you shut it down, you discipline it. Those were the models I had. There was no model for it being okay to be angry and to just be with somebody in anger. It's like, anger's bad, shut it down, get it gone. So you can imagine my kids struggle with anger because I didn't have any good model for how to help them through their anger. And so really, as I've learned and grown, I've desired to grow my capacity to be present with them in their anger, and so that they could feel what they feel. And so this has been kind of the way it's gone is my kids will get angry and then I'll respond poorly, typically by getting angry myself. And then God will convict me that I responded poorly and help me to see what that did to them. And then I go to God and I just try to use the skill of quieting, calm myself down, and then go to God and say, okay, God, how could I do this differently? Would you show me a different way? And often I'll go back to the kiddo and just own what I did and say, here's how I wish I had done differently, and I do that relationally with them. But God had been giving me a lot of pictures in my mind of just being with them, just being present with them and growing my capacity to be there. And I've had lots of really cool opportunities to do this and be successful at times. So this past year, one of my kiddos got super duper angry. And typically when we would try to engage, he would just get more angry. But I went into his room and I just sat on his bed. I didn't touch him. I didn't talk to him. I just sat with him just to be present with him so he knew he wasn't alone. And at one point he looks at me, he's like, what are you doing here? And I said, honey, it's okay that you're angry. And I'm just here. I just want to be here with you. That's it. And you could tell that it settled something in him because there's this lie that's like, I am too inappropriate. Like my feelings are too inappropriate for someone to want to be with me. And to learn that mom still wants to be with me, even when I'm not looking pretty, even when I'm not at my best. That brings healing to know that I don't have to be alone when I'm feeling these feelings. They're not too big for mom to sit and be with me in it. And so really his feelings began to subside pretty quickly. And I've seen this happen a few times with my kiddo. And then there's a place where I can really attune and care for them. But just that being present moment has been really powerful with my kiddos and their anger.
Oh, Kristy, that's a beautiful, beautiful example. And what a way really to express your love and care by just being present there. And to give him that experience that he's not alone. For you actually sought him out and joined him. Like that's beautiful. I hope that gives everybody some hope. Like, people that care about us, this is a way for them to give some love in life, is just to sit with us and join us and not try to fix it, not try to minimize it or make it go away, but just helping us feel connected. Because it's often when we're alone, that's when emotions start to become a little harder to manage. It's when I feel alone in this. So that connection is just, that brings it home. That's a great example.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we really underestimate the power of just being present with someone and their emotions. That's really powerful. But hopefully you're hearing from our stories, we have to develop the capacity to do that. If you can't do that or you struggle with it, you are not alone, but there's hope to be able to develop that. And so we want to talk about ways that you can grow. And we have an opportunity we're going to offer you. So I'm going to screen share with you. So this past year, Chris has been developing a bunch of return to joy resources. And we didn't say that explicitly, but we are talking a lot about the skill of return to joy. This is skill 11, and this is the ability to feel our feelings and get back to a place of peace and joy. So this is a skill we train a lot on at our premier training. But Chris has been developing quite a bit of resources for us this year that we're going to be releasing in 2025, or start releasing in 2025. And he's going to give a preview of what he's been working on at an online workshop on October 24th, Relational Tools for Healthier Emotions. So he'll be talking about building capacity and connecting with Jesus. He'll talk about building awareness, as well as being able to be with others and how to respond to others and their emotions. So he'll have short teaching as well as exercise practice and breakout rooms. This will be a little more casual than our other events, just slightly more casual. So it's a little less expensive. And we just would love to invite you just to spend time with us, just to be with us and to grow these skills together. Anything either of you want to add on this event before I move on?
Well, I just want to, just highlight that, I've really felt for a while that we needed more resources. These are skills we train at Thrive. And in the past, the only way you'd learn a lot of these return to joy skills from us would be at our in-person training. So I have felt the burden to create practices and exercises that people can do. And so this event really is the first opportunity that we're going to start sharing those exercises. And so I'm really excited about it. And I just have felt for a while, Kristy, we really need some more resources on this stuff.
Yes, we do. And we are so excited. We're so excited about this event and also what's to come. So lots of good stuff coming your way. Now, we do have a page on Return to Joy. It's a web page on our website, and you can check this out. It has, a few podcast episodes, a couple of free past webinars at this point. But if you're watching this after the fact, keep in mind, we always keep this website updated. So you might be watching this down the road, and we might have more resources by the time you're watching. So you'll see whatever our most recent offerings when you check out this page. But feel free to check this out, especially to check out the podcast that we've done on this topic. And as always, we invite you to check out our website, thrivetoday.org, to find resources that are the right fit for you. You can email us if you need any help navigating that, info@thrivetoday.org, and we would love to help you find what you're looking for. So we did have a couple really good questions come in, and I'm sorry that we are not having time to respond to those, but I really encourage you to come to the workshop in October. We'll have a little bit of Q&A time there, so you can bring your questions. If something's really pressing you, you can also email it into info@thrivetoday.org. And Chris, I think you had a thought you were going to say before we wrapped up.
Yeah, before our event started, I had mentioned to the team that, I hope that our friends who join us here or watch this later will find some hope, and to know that there is hope. Like, all of us have been on a journey, as our stories share. And as you start learning these skills, you start learning the reality that emotions don't have the final word. There's more going on, right? We are not alone. The living God is with us. And there's actually people who have some skill that we can even practice with. And so the hope here is that everyone discovers some hope, that there's gold in these hills, and it just often just takes a little bit of practice to help us begin to discover that trail.
Wonderful. Jen, any last words from you before we wrap up?
Just that it managing our emotions can be a long journey, but it's a worthwhile journey. And take it from me, who couldn't do any of these, that life is a lot more peaceful when you can. when you do the work and you get to that place where you can just metabolize those emotions as they come, rather than having to push them away or avoid them.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, and I didn't mention, like, I was an emotional wreck. I was like Jen. I couldn't handle any of them, and I would be taken out for days by my emotions. So if God has done a work in our life, he can definitely do a work in yours, and we would love to journey with you through that. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope this has been encouraging to you. Chris and Jen, thank you so much for sharing your stories and being vulnerable with us. And we really look forward to seeing you at another Thrive Today webinar or event. And thanks so much for being with us.